this book comes from a place of being bothered and being pissed off. So I arrived in this country in 2003 and I started researching dance, and I was really excited by the energy and the experimentation that was happening in Britain, and it was really new and fresh and exciting, but the more conversations I would get into, the more it became kind of clear to me as a scholar and as a researcher and as a practitioner that there seemed to be a very clear binary between the world that I came from, which was considered to be quite traditional, and the world that we lived in, or that I was inhabiting now here, which is considered to be really progressive. And I think that was one of the first things that really bothered me, which was that India was seen as a place of tradition, and it was seen as a place of history, and it was a very rich past, that it offered people a lot of rich material to kind of then take ideas forwards. And that really made me angry, because I felt like India was being typecast and stereotyped as a place where new things didn't really happen. It was a place of the old and the ancient. The other thing was that there was it was the look of shock and horror every time I had to kind of introduce myself as, oh, I train in contemporary dance in India. Like, what? Really? What does that look like? So there was absolutely no knowledge that there is a whole history of experimentation and risk-taking in the Indian subcontinent. And secondly, there was very little idea about a whole history of feminist practice that came out of the Indian subcontinent. And as a dancer who trained with two very angry feminists, they don't look very angry on this cover, but they were very hot-blooded feminists who asked some very difficult questions through their body, through the female body. I felt like a very large part of that history was being written off. And that the whole emphasis on experimentation was primarily being placed outside of India. And I was very keen and I was very anxious that that history didn't get written off or erased. So I wanted to write those bodies back in. And for a while, and when Paula kind of got back to me and said that Rachel and Peter were really excited about my proposal, because when I sent in my proposal, it wasn't for the New World Choreography. And when I read the label New World Choreography, I was like, my goodness, I'm trying to make sense of the past. So how would this fit into a series which calls itself New World Choreographies? But then I suppose I'd known this all along, that for us to make sense of where we are now, we must look backwards and figure out how we've arrived to where we have. And for me, this book was as much about making sense of who I am as a dancer as much as who they were. So I think as I began to write this book, and it's taken me quite a while to come here, I've realized that the relevance of this book is not just to scholars and writers and practitioners who are interested in the past, but who are interested in how bodies have been written in to a history that continues to write itself, and how bodies actually, really respond to the past in much more intimate ways than actually we would understand. I think we get caught up in the news so much that we don't recognize how the past speaks to us through bodies today. So I think in the last few years, certainly given the fact that India's kind of made it to the global headlines for some very wrong reasons, particularly in the urgency of the situation, I think kind of demands that the people that I write about here in this book really be given a voice. Not that they need a voice given, because they were very eloquent speakers themselves, but India's in the last few years been seen as a barbaric space where women get raped on buses, and where there's a lot of, it's the way it's portrayed across the world is as a very dark medieval world, and I really felt that politically it does a lot of disservice to a very strong legacy of women-based and women-centered practices that have lived and continue to live through the dancing body. And so the people I discuss in this book are not just women, even though this book is about the feminist movement and it is about risk-taking, avant-garde, experimental dancers. And as Farooq was talking about, and as is the flavor of the series, this series actually examines those slippages, those leaky boundaries between dance and theatre and music. And all of the practitioners I talk about in this book were actually very, very interested in cross-border fertilization. So my first chapter is on Tagore, who set up this experimental laboratory, and he created the dance drama genre, which was absolutely about speaking and dancing on the stage at the same time. The second chapter is about Legendre's film Kalpana, which is one of the most, it's Martin Scorsese's company has recently restored it, digitally remastered it. It's considered to be one of the most it's one of the finest avant-garde dance films ever. So if you get a chance to ever see it, I would really recommend that you do. And so the third chapter looks at dance as protest, where women and men's bodies danced in protest against the colonial authorities. And Farooq was saying something really interesting about how dance emerges out of resistance. You always need this friction, and all of the work that's here in this book comes out of that friction. There's real friction that becomes the genesis of the bodies that then begin to move. And the final two chapters are about the two angry women who trained me to be angry. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this series, and I just hope that even though it is about the past, it speaks to the new as well.
It certainly does. And it speaks to the modern, I suppose, if that's a version of the new.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is always the